I've also been watching the tool itself iterate and reiterate and grow. And it's almost like it's reiterating in the way that I want it to without me telling it. So whatever you guys are doing, it's very smart and it's working really, really well with price analysts like myself. I've come into the short-term rental industry, about eight years ago or so. I came into Vacasa originally, and I took an analytics internship with Vacasa. And throughout my entire time at Vacasa, roughly 5 years, I held several roles in the revenue organization. So it was a really wonderful experience of learning all of the depth and the nuance of how revenue functions in this space, which it's quite complicated. You know, there's millions of data points, and many of the data points are connected to each other. And then, yeah, with the success that I had at Vacasa, I was able to platform up into a really high functioning role at Airbnb. And I spent some time at Airbnb in their analytics department and learning about the amazing tools that they have at Airbnb. It's a lot of really wonderful proprietary tools that they use. And then, yeah, I turned that into a personal endeavor where I've tapped into my entrepreneurial spirit. And over the last year and a half or so, I've been doing individual consulting. And so what I focus on is short-term rental managers who have 20 plus properties. So the goal is to get into a portfolio consultative role with individuals to teach them about revenue. And so it's a fractional revenue offering that I do, but it also, I sort of tap into this service side of my my will, where I serve a customer. And that's just something that I really, truly love. And I found in the world of corporate analytics, you don't get as much of that. They want you to be focused on the numbers because that's your skill set, but I like to work with people. And so I've found this wonderful career pursuit now where I can work with people and I can be analytical, and it's quite wonderful. You know, when I was at Vacasa, we designed a pricing tool. And so we worked with our UI team and our developers to create a pricing tool that was adaptive to the price analysts themselves. And so when I came into this consulting role, I had met a lot of people who were using PriceLabs. And so with each one of these customers, I would go in and I would work to solve problems. And so every time I would work to solve a problem, I'd learn a little bit more about PriceLabs. And so in my time of learning about PriceLabs, I've also been watching the tool itself iterate and reiterate and grow. And it's almost like it's reiterating in the way that I want it to without me telling it. So whatever you guys are doing, it's very smart and it's working really, really well with price analysts like myself. And so then it went from being like a challenge to learn PriceLabs to a joy of working with PriceLabs. So I have now started to platform up some very specific kind of proprietary combinations of settings that I use that allow me to be really agile and really smart with changes that I make. And so problem solving has become kind of more of like a quick piece of it. And now I can spend more time on the analytics side, delivering data, delivering the type of information that I can give. And so that's really where I'm at now, is just being really kind of in the analytics side of PriceLabs. I know where my settings are, just in terms of like the standard suite of settings. And so I know which tweaks I need to make in order to pursue the data I want to see. The way I think about PriceLabs and the way I kind of deconstruct it is I think of it as layers. And I think about the market factors as like the baseline layer. And then groups is a way for me to bring in an extra layer. And then like min stay profiles is an extra layer. And so as I sort of functionalize, I think of it as like a layer cake, right? And so we all love cake, or, you know, some people maybe if they have food allergies don't love cake, but but I think a really well-made layer cake, you know, every layer kind of has to sit on top of each layer and they complement each other, right? So So when I think of the market factors, that is, to me, is just like the standard algorithm. And then when I apply a group set of functions, that sort of personalizes the algorithm. It's like the next layer where I'm thinking about how much deviation do I have from low to high? How much leverage do I have from one season to another? How compact is the lead from one season to another? And then as I have those settings in place, it really sets everything in motion. And so I discovered subgroups as a way to make yet another change or another personalization to some settings without interrupting either of those first two settings. So I like to think of the market factors and the group settings as something that I want to put as least interruption into those settings if I have to solve a particular problem. And so how I've come to really appreciate and enjoy subgroups is a way to make an additional customization without interrupting my existing customizations. And so one way in which I think that I've used it very specifically with great success is I have a client who is in an extremely high summer producing region, and their business is really condensed. It's basically from mid-June to like early September, and everything they do is in that window. And they have this really beautiful booking pattern of 7-day bookings. And so what they do is, on an operational level, they help to do that. They help to manage that through designated turnovers. So they will turn over the homes on either Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. And so within the group hierarchy, I have the group settings based on size of the home, but they might have a 1-bedroom who has a Friday turnover and a 5-bedroom who has a Friday turnover. So I can't adjust the groups based on the turnover. So that's how I brought in subgroups. By bringing in subgroups, I was able to designate, we do Friday turnovers here, we do Saturday turnovers here, and we do Sunday turnovers here, but the size of the home could still remain uninterrupted. And so all of those really wonderful group settings that I have to drive the type of volume for the size of home is still in place. And now I have the designation of the turnover. I think in a world without groups or subgroups, because you can do it that way, I think you can do things at a listing level. The challenge then becomes, without groups and subgroups, is if you make a change, you need to go into your creative mind and figure out, how is that change going to impact maybe something else that I have set in my system? And so you get into a case of like chasing your tail or playing whack-a-mole. There's a lot of sort of chaotic analogies you can make, but basically you're going to spend equal or even more time cleaning up than you would setting a new strategy into place. And so the downstream impact is even greater once you get into an analytical set where you're taking data and you're deriving information from that data. If that data is interrupted because some of your strategy was to clean up and not to create a strategy, you're not actually reading strategical data, you're reading QA data, you're reading something other than what you were intending to do. And so the impact is quite broad if you don't have really solid group and subgroup settings in place. So for me, that's a big part of my program, is to make sure all these settings are in place to A, make more money, but B, to help reinform my strategies. So if I'm not clean with my settings, then the data I'm reading isn't strategical data. Our summer bookings are already so much higher, and it's really wonderful. That particular client was kind of interesting because when I took them on, they didn't believe in dynamic pricing. They were very, very anti-dynamic pricing. And so I took them from a PMS price to a PriceLabs price, and they're really shocked to see how much more people are willing to pay for their product. I think at the end of the day, it was just like they didn't see the true value of these homes because they were afraid to charge more. And so in this process of putting in more sort of seasonally adjusted prices, they found that there's a lot of people willing to pay a premium to have that experience. And especially when you're in a market with such a condensed window of opportunity, you have to send great prices out there and see if they take. I think the most important setting that everyone who has a portfolio of 20 plus properties is the short window setting. So your close in prices. And I think this is where a lot of market analysis becomes important. So what I look at is in the neighborhood data tab, I look at the market and I try and fit the booking window to my short window pricing lever. And so if the market is showing a 60-day short booking window, then I want my short pricing lever to be set to 60 days. If the market looks like a 45-day, then I want to have my short window lever set to 45 days. And so to me, this is a really critical piece because it's the foundational piece from which all of your additional settings are going to come in. Because if you're on a 45-day short window, then you want to know roughly about where to put your long window premium in place so that you at least have some time where you're floating with the market. And by floating with the market, I just mean not having a premium in place or a reduction in place. So you're just going with just strictly the algorithm itself. And so for me, on a data standpoint, and this is where it gets a little advanced, is I want to be able to analyze how much am I impacting the short window with my settings? How much am I pulling from the algorithm itself? Like when the algorithm is just the price, and then how much am I able to capture a premium? And so by getting those three different pieces of information, maybe the Neapolitan ice cream on top of your layer cake it allows you to read your settings and know if they're working. And so that's I think a really, really key piece. And I think if I'm correct, I think you guys call it the last minute pricing lever.